that no one in the world can do this man's work when going to work. The first thing the man does is to use a chisel to dig up the trees on the mountain, smooth the mountain, and then pour some blood on the mountain, and a snowy mountain is ready. Then the man uses a pump to release water into the valley, forming an artificial lake. When he is busy with work, he uses this many-ton lawn mower to cut the hair of the Yangtze forest. As the man was pouring water into the Duding Lake, he suddenly found a group of primitive people standing under his feet. The primitive man saw such a tall human for the first time in his life. Seeing Ultraman, he felt like an ordinary person, but looking at it from this angle, it seems that Ultraman is urinating. Daring to urinate on the head of a primitive man is the biggest insult to the primitive tribe. The primitive man had a fierce expression on his face and felt that he would cut him, so he was so scared that he immediately apologized. That's why there is a result. It seems that I have long considered men as God. I used to find men very strange. Unexpectedly, his brother's job was more exciting. My brother's job is to protect the environment. I saw him lying on the china, like this human, and taking all the poisonous gas into his lungs in one breath. The amount of poisonous gas in his lungs is probably more than that of a goldfish. After reducing carbon emissions, my brother went to the Sahara Desert and absorbed solar storms using solar energy. At the same time, a rather stormy wind suddenly started blowing on the sea. Then he took out a special exhaust fan and pointed it towards the eye of the storm and immediately pulled the storm away. When the computers of the International Security Center were infected with a virus, my brother was able to enter the digital world and scan the very virus using his hand speed, which he had practiced for 2.5 years. So I hope you don't have some superpowers, otherwise you will not get the job. The house was surrounded by water and was about to sink, but unexpectedly, facing such a fierce flood, the person in the house not only ran to save his life, but also stood in front of the window and started shouting. What is even more surprising is that the flood water outside the house rose more than a meter high, but not a single drop of water entered the house. But this was not because the house was well sealed, but because the person had already pasted waterproofing around the house. But the person made a fatal mistake and forgot to seal the ventilation as well. This resulted in heavy floods. At first the man thought that the water would not drown him, but he did not think that the water level would soon rise to his knees, and his dogs were in distress. Due to the flood, the dogs were forced to stand on the furniture. But as the water increased, they started panicking. Without caring whether they could or not, they foolishly lined up to jump into the water. Soon all the dogs became drowned dogs. At this time, the person was in the water on the second floor. Little did he know that a man almost died in the flood waters while bathing from the bottom to the second floor. There was no option but to keep climbing up to avoid drowning. This time the man ran into the water on the second floor. He thought that the terrain was very high and he would drown permanently in the water. However, he did not expect that the speed of the water was much faster than the man imagined. In 2.5 hours, Mahesh saw that the flood waters reached the second floor roof. It seemed that there was no way but to keep climbing up the roof. As a result, when the man climbed up the roof, he was completely shocked by what he saw. The world around him turned into a vast ocean and his house floated in the sea overnight. A lonely woman floated in the sea.